So the next thing we're talking about is Oxford University. Protesters disrupt gender critical debate. For some reason, again, Oxford University booked gender critical extremist Helen Joyce, 57. And there was a load of protests because there always is. Because these people are really unpopular. Nearly 700 people signed a petition protesting transphobia at Oxford University after protesters disrupted a talk by a gender-critical author. Shortly after Helen Joyce, 57, entered the college for a discussion on trans issues, sex and gender, a group of pro-trans protesters staged a walkout, according to the Times. This reportedly left Miss Joyce and the host briefly at a loss for words. Good. Get fucked. This is not the first time a gender-critical speaker has caused uproar. In May 2023, hundreds of people gathered outside Oxford Union to protest a talk by the gender-critical academic Kathleen Stock. Here's Helen Joyce hugging, equally extreme, but more openly extreme, Posey Parker / Kelly J. Keane Minshall. According to the Times, Miss Joyce describes herself as a sex realist. I can't believe that they actually say this. If you don't know why this is crazy, go on Wikipedia and look up what race realism is. When someone says they're a race realist, they mean they're a racist, but they don't say slurs in public, and they try and justify it with fake science. That's what it means. So, Kelly J. Keane Minshall, or whatever her name is, she'll happily say slurs in public. Helen Joyce doesn't say as many slurs in public, doesn't really say slurs in public, because she's a sex realist. She just makes up fake statistics to try and justify taking away trans people's rights. She has said that being trans is a rights-destroying belief. Sorry, you were born wrong, so now you existing is destroying my rights. She argues that the belief of being born in the wrong body has led to a medical crisis in which young people are encouraged to take life-altering treatments without sufficient scrutiny. Sufficient for who? We know it's sufficient for the people transitioning, because that's why the regret rates are so low and the satisfaction rates are so high. And there's an insane amount of scrutiny already. So, not sufficient for who? Well, could it be that the person who is arguing that there's not enough scrutiny also happens to want to create a world without trans people full stop? And maybe their cause for not being enough scrutiny is actually just a front to try and hide their true views behind. Maybe. So the host said, in an interview in 2022, you advocated for keeping down or reducing the number of people who transition to limit the harm done, calling everyone who transitions sex damaged, and every person who believes that you and every person who believes what you call gender ideology a huge problem to a sane world. And then her response was, just in case you thought she'd changed her mind there since then, gesturing towards the empty seats left by the protesters, Miss Joyce said, "Look at this, it's absolute insanity. You think people protesting against you is insanity. Maybe you're just calling everything insanity. What are you talking about? How is that insane? You say horrific things like you want to reduce the number of trans people, and then when people protest you, you think that's correct. You think that's evidence that you are right? This is just like abuser logic, isn't it? It's like you do something horrible and then they react to you, and then you say, well, that's why I did something horrible. You're trying to justify taking away trans people's rights and banning them from transitioning and reducing their number, however that involves. You're trying to justify doing that because of the insanity of them protesting against you wanting to do that. Gender critical people are the aggressors, and they constantly try and portray themselves as not the aggressors, and that's because they are lying. It is not good for you to cut off body parts or to take hormones. If you can live with the body you were born with, that's a better outcome. For who? Why? On what grounds? Based on what? Like, just completely nothing. You've just completely made that up. You just don't like it. That is the bottom line for all of these fucking freaks. They'll try and say, like, oh, what about concerns and scrutiny, and what about people who might regret it and all this kind of stuff. And then when you're like, well, here's the statistics, here's the evidence, nothing you believe is backed up by any evidence at all. They'll just say, well, I don't like it. It's bad for you. It's not good. That'd be better if you didn't do it. Why? Better for who? Better for you, because you're a rational dickhead who hates trans people, and that's it. That's the only real argument here. Anyway, we got a statement here from the students. It must be so frustrating. Like, when I was at university, this wasn't as big a thing. So there wasn't constantly anti-trans talkers coming to speak at my university. It just must be infuriating when you're like an LGBT person at a university and they're like, oh, this week we've booked Hitler to talk about whether you should exist or not. It's like, why? Why do you have to keep doing this? Why do you get these ridiculous freaks on? They're always like, I think we got the response here. They always do this. Freedom of speech allows views expressed to be tested through argument and debate. The same would apply to a similar event with the speaker of a different view. Yeah, but why are you booking these people? Are you booking people who think that the earth is flat? And if you are, and it's like some one-off like spectacle where everyone comes to laugh at some clown, okay. If you're booking them all the time, multiple in the same week or for the same event, why are you doing that? Who is booking them? What is the reasoning? You can't just say, oh, freedom of speech. It's like, okay, you've booked 365 speakers this year, and like, how many of them are gender critical? If it's more than one, then it's not just freedom of speech. You're making a decision to platform these ridiculous, extreme hate-filled people who, like, you've even highlighted yourself, are calling to reduce the number of trans people. It's just crazy. Anyway, the student body has said, as a student body, we object to Oxford University's decision to platform transphobic speakers such as Helen Joyce during LGBTQ History Month and throughout the academic year. Exactly, there's never just one. By inviting anti-trans campaigners to speak to the staff and student bodies, this college and the university contradict their own policy to ensure that steps are taken to avoid the occurrence of discrimination, whether it direct or indirect, against trans people and gender minorities. Yeah, absolutely. Like, the reality is, if you're platforming hate speakers, then the people they're targeting aren't as safe and free as everyone else. Yeah, it's just rubbish. We understand the strength of feeling on sensitive issues involved and will continue to offer welfare support to any students affected. Maybe just don't book them. Maybe only have people who are rational, who aren't hate speakers, who are actually saying what is true. Or if you're going to have some like freak on to come and say that they believe the world is flat or that trans people should be eradicated or whatever, then don't just have some neutral cis man presenter or whatever. Have someone on who's going to fact check them and eviscerate them and humiliate them in front of the crowd. Debate on the moon landing being fake. So if you had some moon landing conspiracy theorist come to Oxford University and it was the one time they'd come that year and they weren't calling to eradicate people who work for NASA, and you had them on with a bunch of experts who had pre-prepared all of their sources and arguments, that, yeah, that's fine. But if you book the 15th moon denier that month or whatever, and you like constantly talk about protests against them as if it's some kind of attack on freedom of speech, and you just have some neutral person, moderator who's like, oh, we understand you think the moon's fake. Tell us more. Like, then that's a bullshit position, isn't it?